The phone call came at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting when my cell phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me excuse myself and answer. "Is this Claire Hartley?" a man's voice asked, formal and slightly impatient. "Yes, this is Claire. This is Preston Walsh, director of Riverside Care Home. I'm calling regarding your mother, Dorothy Hartley." My stomach dropped. Mom had been at Riverside for 8 months now. Ever since her Alzheimer's had progressed to the point where I couldn't safely care for her at home anymore. "Is she okay?" I asked immediately. "She's fine physically," Preston replied, his tone oddly flat. "But I'm calling to inform you that we're implementing new visitor restrictions. Your mother's condition has deteriorated to the point where visits are becoming too disruptive to her routine. We feel it's in her best interest to limit outside contact for the time being." I stood frozen in the hallway outside the conference room. "What do you mean, limit contact? She's my mother. I visit her 3 times a week. And those visits agitate her significantly," Preston said smoothly. "She becomes confused and distressed after you leave. The medical team and I have decided that reducing visitation will help stabilize her condition." Something felt wrong about this conversation, but I couldn't quite pinpoint what. "I'd like to speak with her doctor about this," I said carefully. "Dr. Patterson has been treating her since she moved in." "What does he say?" "Dr. Patterson agrees with our assessment," Preston replied without hesitation. "This is a medical decision based on what's best for Dorothy's well-being." "When can I visit her to discuss this in person?" "That's what I'm trying to explain, Miss Hartley. We're restricting visits for the next month. After that, we'll reassess her condition and determine if visitation can resume on a limited basis." A month. He was telling me I couldn't see my mother for an entire month. "This is unacceptable," I said, my voice rising. "You can't just ban me from seeing her without proper justification." "We're not banning you," Preston said, his tone hardening slightly. "We're implementing medically necessary restrictions. If you'd like to contest this decision, you're welcome to file a formal complaint with the state licensing board. In the meantime, the restriction stands." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone, anger and confusion warring inside me. I'd visited Mom just 2 days ago. She'd been confused. Yes, that was the nature of her disease. But agitated? Distressed? She'd smiled when she saw me, held my hand, told me stories about people I didn't know from a past I couldn't verify. The same as always. What had changed in 48 hours? I immediately called Dr. Patterson's office. His receptionist, a kind woman named Angela, whom I'd spoken with many times, answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi Angela, this is Claire Hartley. I need to speak with Dr. Patterson about my mother." "Of course, Claire, let me check his schedule." "Actually, I need to ask you something first. Has Dr. Patterson recommended restricting my visits with my mother?" There was a pause. "Not that I'm aware of. Let me pull her file." I heard keyboard clicks, then Angela's voice returned, puzzled. "I'm looking at Dorothy's chart now. The last note from Dr. Patterson is from last week. He documented that she's stable, responding well to her current medications, and enjoying regular family visits. There's nothing here about restricting visitation." My pulse quickened. Preston Walsh just called me claiming Dr. Patterson agreed with a decision to ban visits for a month. That's strange. Dr. Patterson would have documented that in her chart, and he's actually on vacation this week. He left Saturday for a medical conference in Chicago. He wouldn't have made a decision like that right before leaving. So Preston had lied. The question was why. "Angela, can you do me a favor? Can you check when Dr. Patterson is scheduled to see my mother next?" More keyboard clicks. "He has her down for a routine check next Tuesday. And there's nothing in the system about my visits being problematic? Nothing at all." After hanging up with Angela, I sat in my car in the parking garage, thinking. Preston Walsh had lied about Dr. Patterson's recommendation. He'd invented a medical justification for banning my visits. But why? I pulled out my phone and searched for information about visitor rights in care facilities. What I found was illuminating. In our state, care homes couldn't restrict family visits without documented medical necessity. And even then, family members had the right to contest such restrictions. Preston had clearly hoped I wouldn't know my rights, that I'd simply accept his authority and stay away. But from what? I thought back over my recent visits. Had I noticed anything unusual? Any signs that Mom was being mistreated or neglected? Actually, yes. Small things I'd dismissed at the time. 3 weeks ago, Mom had a bruise on her arm she couldn't explain. The staff said she'd bumped into a doorframe. 2 weeks ago, she seemed more sedated than usual, barely able to keep her eyes open during my visit. They said they'd adjusted her medication. Last week I'd arrived to find her room hadn't been cleaned, her bed sheets unchanged despite the care plan stating they'd be changed daily. Each incident alone seemed minor. But together, they formed a pattern. I made a decision. I was going to Riverside right now. Visitor restrictions be damned. Preston Walsh could call security if he wanted. I'd let them try to physically prevent me from seeing my own mother. I arrived at Riverside Care Home 20 minutes later. The facility was a pleasant-looking building in a quiet suburban neighborhood, exactly the kind of place that looked safe and professional from the outside. I walked through the main entrance with purposeful strides. The receptionist, a young woman named Stephanie, whom I'd chatted with dozens of times, looked up with a smile that quickly faded. "Claire, hi, I am, Mr. Walsh left instructions that if you came by—" "I'm here to see my mother," I interrupted firmly. "She's in room 247. "I know, but Mr. Walsh said—" "I'm aware of what Mr. Walsh said. I'm also aware that he has no legal authority to prevent me from visiting my mother without proper documentation. Has he provided you with a court order or medical directive signed by Dr. Patterson?" Stephanie shifted uncomfortably. "No, but he said—" "Then I'm going to see my mother. If Preston has a problem with that, he can discuss it with me directly." I walked past the reception desk before Stephanie could respond. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression calm and confident. Behind me I heard Stephanie pick up the phone, undoubtedly calling Preston. I took the elevator to the second floor and walked down the familiar hallway to Mom's room. The door was closed, which was unusual. Staff typically kept doors open during the day for better monitoring. I knocked once and entered. Mom was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, staring out at the garden below. She turned when I entered, and her face lit up with recognition. "Oh, how lovely. I was hoping you'd come today," she said, though in her confusion, she probably had no real sense of when I'd last visited. I knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hand. "Hi, Mom, how are you feeling?" "Tired, dear. So tired all the time. They keep giving me pills and then I just want to sleep." I studied her face carefully. She did look more exhausted than usual, her eyes slightly unfocused. "What kind of pills?" "I don't know. The nice man gives them to me every morning, says they'll help me feel better." "What nice man? Dr. Patterson?" Mom looked confused. "I don't think so. The man in charge, he comes to my room." Before I could ask more questions, the door burst open. Preston Walsh stood in the doorway, his face flushed with anger. "Miss Hartley, you need to leave immediately. I made it very clear that visits are restricted." I stood slowly, positioning myself between Preston and my mother. "And I made it clear that I know my rights. You have no legal authority to prevent me from seeing her. This is a private facility. I can refuse entry to anyone I deem disruptive to our residents' care." "Then call the police," I said calmly. "Let's get law enforcement involved and document exactly why you're trying to keep me away from my mother." Preston's confident expression flickered. He clearly hadn't expected me to call his bluff. "There's no need to involve authorities," he said, his tone shifting to something almost conciliatory. "I'm simply trying to do what's best for Dorothy. Perhaps we can discuss this in my office." "I'm not leaving her room until I understand exactly what's happening here," I replied. "Mom just told me you've been giving her medication personally. That's unusual, isn't it? Don't the nurses handle medication distribution?" "I occasionally assist with medication when we're short-staffed," Preston said quickly. "It's perfectly normal." "What medication are you giving her?" "Her prescribed medications, of course, everything documented in her care plan." I turned to Mom. "Have the nurses been giving you medication too?" Mom looked confused. "I don't know, dear, just the nice man. He says it will help me rest." I looked back at Preston. "She's not getting her medications from the nursing staff, only from you." "Why is that?" "This is ridiculous," Preston blustered. "I don't have to justify standard care procedures to you." Actually, you do. I'm her medical power of attorney. I have legal rights to information about her treatment. The color drained from Preston's face slightly. Something I'd said had struck a nerve. I think you should leave now, Miss Hartley, before I'm forced to call security and have you escorted out. Go ahead, I replied. I'd love to explain to security why you're preventing me from visiting my mother, who specifically asked for my company. Preston stared at me for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he turned and left the room, pulling the door closed behind him with more force than necessary. I sat down on Mom's bed, my hands shaking now that the confrontation was over. Something was very wrong here. Preston's behavior, the unusual medication pattern, the sudden visitor restrictions, it all pointed to something I couldn't quite see yet. Mom, I said gently, has anyone else come to visit you? Anyone besides me? She thought for a moment. Your sister was here last week. We had such a nice time. My blood ran cold. Mom, I don't have a sister. You only had one child, me. Oh, that's right, Mom said, her confusion evident. I get so mixed up these days. But someone came, a woman. She said she was family. What did she want? I don't remember, dear. We talked about something. Papers, maybe? I signed something. Or did I? Mom's face crumpled with frustration. I can't remember. I hate not being able to remember. I hugged her gently. It's okay, Mom. Don't worry about it. But I was worried. Very worried. Someone claiming to be family had visited Mom and possibly gotten her to sign documents. Combined with Preston's strange behavior and the unexplained medication, this was adding up to something serious. I needed help. Professional help. I stayed with Mom for another hour, despite knowing Preston was probably fuming somewhere in the building. When I finally left, I went straight to my car and called my lawyer. My attorney, Lawrence Brennan, listened carefully as I explained the situation. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Claire, what you're describing sounds like potential elder abuse. The unexplained medication, the mysterious visitor, the attempt to isolate her from family. These are red flags. What should I do? First, I'm going to file an emergency motion to ensure your visitation rights can't be restricted. Second, I'm going to contact the state's Adult Protective Services. They need to investigate this facility immediately. Third, I want you to document everything. Every visit, every conversation, every concerning observation. Should I move her to a different facility? Not yet. If something illegal is happening, moving her might destroy evidence. Plus, Preston could try to block the transfer, claiming it's medically inadvisable. We need an official investigation first. After hanging up with Lawrence, I sat in the parking lot watching the care home's entrance. Staff members came and went, some I recognized from previous visits. I wondered how many of them knew what Preston was doing. How many were complicit, and how many were simply unaware. My phone buzzed with an email from Lawrence. He'd already filed the emergency motion and contacted Adult Protective Services. An investigator would be assigned within 24 hours. I drove home, feeling slightly better. Help was coming. Preston Walsh's suspicious behavior would be examined by professionals. What I didn't know yet was just how deep the corruption went. The next morning I received a call from a woman named Victoria Hayes, an investigator with Adult Protective Services. Miss Hartley, I've been assigned to your mother's case. I'd like to visit Riverside Care Home today to conduct an initial assessment. Would you be available to meet me there? Absolutely, I replied. What time? Let's say 2 p.m. I prefer to arrive without advance notice, but I'd like you present to help with background information. At 1:45 p.m., I arrived at Riverside and waited in the parking lot. Victoria pulled up 10 minutes later in an unmarked sedan. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Claire Hartley? She asked, extending her hand. That's me. Thank you for coming so quickly. Elder abuse cases are priority, she replied. Walk me through what you've observed. I gave her the full rundown as we walked to the entrance. The suspicious bruises, the excessive sedation, the mystery visitor, Preston's lies about Dr. Patterson's recommendations, the unusual medication administration. Victoria took notes on a tablet, her expression growing more serious with each detail. Has your mother's financial situation changed recently? Any unusual account activity? I manage her finances. Let me check. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app I used to monitor Mom's accounts. My stomach dropped as I saw recent transactions I didn't recognize. 3 withdrawals in the past 2 weeks. $5,000 each, all labeled as care facility fees. That's not right, I said, showing Victoria the screen. Her care is paid monthly by automatic withdrawal. These are extra charges I never authorized. Victoria's expression hardened. That's $15,000 in 2 weeks. Do you have documentation of your mother's actual care costs? Everything. Her contract specifies exactly what's included in her monthly fee. These additional charges aren't explained anywhere. We entered the building together. Stephanie at reception looked nervous when she saw me, then panicked when she noticed Victoria's official identification. I'm Victoria Hayes with Adult Protective Services, Victoria announced. I'm here to conduct an investigation. Please notify your supervisor that I'll need access to all facility records, staff, and residents. Stephanie's hands trembled as she picked up the phone. Mr. Walsh isn't going to like this, she muttered. Mr. Walsh's preferences aren't relevant, Victoria replied coolly. This is an official investigation. He's required by law to cooperate fully. Preston appeared within minutes, his face a mask of professional courtesy that didn't quite hide his anger. Miss Hayes, I wasn't informed that an investigation had been scheduled. We typically receive advance notice. This isn't a scheduled inspection, Victoria interrupted. This is an active investigation based on specific allegations of abuse and financial exploitation. I'll need immediate access to your records, including all financial transactions, medication logs, and visitor records for Dorothy Hartley. Preston's jaw tightened. Of course. Though I'm certain you'll find everything in order. Miss Hartley has been making unfounded accusations because she's struggling to accept her mother's declining condition. I'll determine what's founded or unfounded, Victoria replied. Shall we begin with your office? In Preston's office, Victoria methodically went through files while I sat to the side, watching Preston's confident facade slowly crack. She pulled up Mom's electronic records, comparing them against hard copies, checking medication logs against doctor's orders. These medication entries, Victoria said, pointing to the screen. They show sedatives being administered 3 times daily, but Dr. Patterson's orders specify once daily as needed. Who authorized the increase? I did, Preston said quickly. Mrs. Hartley was experiencing increased agitation. I consulted with Dr. Patterson by phone and he approved the adjustment. There's no documentation of that phone consultation in her file. An oversight. I'll have it added. Victoria's expression showed what she thought of that explanation. And these financial charges. 3 withdrawals of $5,000 each. What services do those cover? Preston pulled up a spreadsheet. Additional care services, physical therapy, specialized memory care activities, enhanced monitoring. Mrs. Hartley's contract includes all of those services in her base fee, I interjected. We specifically chose this facility because everything was inclusive. The contract covers standard services, Preston countered. These are enhanced services that require additional staffing. Show me documentation of those services being provided, Victoria demanded. Staff schedules, therapy session notes, activity logs. Preston hesitated. I'll need to pull those from our other database. Please do so now. While Preston fumbled with his computer, Victoria turned to me. The visitor logs. Do you know who came to see your mother claiming to be family? No. Mom was too confused to give me details. Victoria pulled up the electronic visitor system. There's no record of anyone except you visiting Dorothy in the past 3 months. That's impossible, I said. Mom told me a woman came to see her, someone who claimed to be family. Preston looked uncomfortable. Visitors are supposed to sign in, but sometimes people slip past reception if we're busy. Your system shows badge swipes for entry to the resident floors, Victoria observed. No badge, no entry. That's your own security protocol, so either someone bypassed your security or someone with authorized access visited Dorothy without logging it properly. The implications hung in the air. Preston was looking increasingly trapped. I'd like to speak with your staff, Victoria said, starting with the nurses who care for Dorothy. Of course. Though I should mention that our staff are very busy with patient care. This is a legal investigation, Mr. Walsh. Your staff are required to cooperate. I'll start with whoever's on duty now. Preston led us to the nursing station on the second floor. 3 nurses were working. Brenda, a woman in her 50s I'd met several times. Carlos, a young man who was new since Mom moved in, and Patricia, who'd been particularly kind during Mom's adjustment period. When Victoria explained she was investigating potential abuse and exploitation, all 3 nurses exchanged meaningful glances. "I need to speak with each of you individually," Victoria said. "Who would like to go first?" Patricia stepped forward immediately. "I'll talk to you. And I have some things you need to know." Preston's face went pale. "Patricia, I'm sure Miss Hayes just has routine questions." "Mr. Walsh, please step back," Victoria said firmly. "I need to speak with staff members privately without management present." We moved to an empty conference room. Patricia sat down heavily, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. "I've been wanting to report this for weeks," she said before Victoria even asked a question. "But I was afraid I'd lose my job. I'm a single mother. I can't afford to be unemployed." "You're protected by whistleblower laws," Victoria assured her. "What have you witnessed?" Patricia took a deep breath. "Preston has been medicating several residents without proper authorization. He claims it's to keep them calm, but he's using sedatives way beyond what their doctors prescribed. Dorothy is one of them, but there are at least 4 others I know about." My heart sank. This was worse than I'd thought. "Why would he do that?" Victoria asked. "To keep them compliant, to keep them from complaining or noticing things." Patricia pulled out her phone. "I've been documenting it. I know I could get in trouble for not reporting sooner, but I needed proof before I spoke up." She showed us photos of medication logs with Preston's signature, showing doses that didn't match doctor's orders. Timestamps proving medications were given when Preston was the only one on the floor. Notes in residence files that had clearly been altered. "There's more," Patricia continued, her voice shaking. "Preston has been bringing someone into the facility after hours. A woman. I don't know who she is, but I've seen her going into rooms of residents with dementia, residents whose families don't visit often." "When did this start?" Victoria asked. "About 4 months ago. At first, I thought maybe she was a consultant or specialist. But she doesn't sign in. She doesn't interact with staff. She just goes directly to certain residents' rooms with Preston." Victoria was typing rapidly on her tablet. "Can you identify which residents she visits?" Patricia pulled out a piece of paper. "I wrote them down. 6 residents total. All with moderate to severe dementia, all with limited family contact. Dorothy Hartley is the only one who gets regular family visits, which might be why Preston tried to restrict Claire's access." I felt sick. "What do you think this woman is doing?" "I don't know for certain," Patricia admitted. "But one of the residents, Mr. Campbell, mentioned signing papers a few weeks ago. When his daughter visited and I mentioned it, she was confused because she handles all his legal affairs. She said he's not competent to sign anything." Victoria's expression was grim. "This sounds like a pattern of financial exploitation. The unauthorized sedation keeps residents compliant and confused. The mysterious visitor could be getting them to sign financial documents, power of attorney, changes to wills, property transfers." "Could someone really do that?" I asked. "Get legal documents signed by people with dementia?" "If the documents are notarized by someone complicit or fooled by the situation, yes. Especially if the resident appears lucid at the moment of signing, which would be easier to achieve if they're being given medication that makes them more suggestible." Patricia nodded. "Preston has been very careful about timing. The woman visits late afternoon when most residents are more alert, but after he's given them whatever medication he's using. They seem calm and cooperative, not heavily sedated." "I need to speak with the other nurses," Victoria said. "Are they aware of what you've witnessed?" "Brenda knows something's wrong, but she's close to retirement and afraid to risk her pension. Carlos is new and might not have noticed the patterns yet." Victoria interviewed Brenda next. The older nurse was initially defensive, but when Victoria showed her Patricia's documentation and explained the legal protections for whistleblowers, her resistance crumbled. "I've worked in elder care for 30 years, Brenda said quietly. "I've never seen anything like this. Preston seemed like a good manager at first, professional, competent. But about 6 months ago, things changed." "Changed how?" Victoria prompted. He became controlling, started handling things that should have been nursing staff responsibilities. Medication distribution, room assignments, visitor scheduling. He said it was about improving efficiency, but it felt like he was trying to control access to certain residents. Did you notice the unauthorized medications? Brenda nodded reluctantly. I questioned it once. Preston said he had verbal orders from Dr. Patterson. When I suggested we should document those orders properly, he told me I was overstepping my role and to focus on my assigned duties. Did you report this to anyone? I considered it, but Preston is friendly with the regional director. They golf together. I was afraid my complaint would go nowhere, and I'd be marked as a troublemaker. Victoria turned to me. Do you know who owns this facility? It's part of a chain. Riverside is one of about 15 care homes owned by some corporation. I need that corporate information. If Preston is acting with approval from higher up, this investigation just got much bigger. Carlos, the young nurse, was interviewed last. He'd only been working at Riverside for 2 months and hadn't noticed the patterns the other nurses had described. But he did remember something useful. There was a woman here last week, Carlos said. She wasn't wearing a visitor badge, which I thought was weird. When I asked if she'd signed in, she said Preston had authorized her visit. She went straight to Mrs. Hartley's room. Can you describe this woman? Victoria asked. Carlos thought for a moment. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Blonde hair in a professional style. She was wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase. She looked like a lawyer or businesswoman. How long did she stay with Mrs. Hartley? Maybe 20 minutes. When she left, she went straight to Preston's office. I saw them talking, through the window. He looked angry about something. Victoria turned to me. Does that description match anyone you know? Anyone who might have a reason to visit your mother? I shook my head. I can't think of anyone. Mom's friends are all her age, in their 70s and 80s. This sounds like someone much younger. After finishing the staff interviews, Victoria insisted on speaking with several residents, including Mom. We found her in the common room, sitting alone by the window with that distant look I'd come to recognize. Mrs. Hartley, Victoria said gently, sitting beside her. I'm Victoria Hayes. I'm here to make sure you're being taken care of properly. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? Mom looked at her with mild confusion. Of course, dear, though I'm not sure I'll remember the answers. That's all right. Just tell me what you do remember. Has anyone asked you to sign any papers recently? Mom's face brightened slightly. Oh yes, the nice lady came. She said it was important, something about making sure Claire would be taken care of. My blood ran cold. What did you sign, Mom? I don't remember exactly. Papers. Legal papers. The nice lady said it was for your benefit. Victoria pulled out her tablet and showed Mom several photos of legal documents. Did the papers look like any of these? Mom squinted at the screen, then pointed to one. That one looks familiar. The nice lady said signing it would help Claire inherit everything properly. It was a power of attorney form. Victoria and I exchanged looks. If someone had gotten Mom to sign over power of attorney, they could access her accounts, sell her property, make financial decisions in her name. Mrs. Hartley, do you remember the nice lady's name? Victoria asked. Helen or Ellen? Something like that. Mom's face crumpled with frustration. I'm sorry, I can't remember. That's okay, you're doing great. One more question. Did Mr. Walsh, the manager here, ask you to sign anything? Preston. No, I don't think so. He just gives me my medicine and makes sure I'm comfortable. He's very attentive. After leaving Mom in the common room, Victoria made several phone calls. First to the police, then to the state attorney general's office, then to the corporate headquarters of the company that owned Riverside. This is bigger than I initially thought, she told me. If someone obtained fraudulent power of attorney over your mother, they could be doing the same to other residents. We're looking at organized elder abuse and financial exploitation. What happens now? Now we bring in law enforcement. This is beyond Adult Protective Services jurisdiction. This is criminal. Preston Walsh is going to be arrested, and we're going to trace every financial transaction connected to these residents. Within an hour, 2 detectives arrived at Riverside. Preston was called to his office, where he found Victoria, the detectives, and several corporate representatives waiting for him. I wasn't allowed in the room for Preston's interrogation, but I watched through the window as his confident demeanor completely disintegrated. His face went from red to pale to red again as Victoria presented the evidence: the medication logs, the unauthorized financial charges, the staff testimonies, Mom's description of signing documents. After 20 minutes, one of the detectives emerged. "We're taking him into custody," Detective Raymond told me. "We've also secured a warrant to search his office and personal files. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement." "What about my mother and the other residents who might be affected?" "Adult Protective Services will assign temporary oversight to ensure all residents receive proper care. The corporate office is sending a crisis management team and will be investigating every resident Preston had contact with to determine the full scope of the fraud." As Preston was led out in handcuffs, several staff members watched from doorways. None of them looked surprised. None of them tried to defend him. Stephanie, the receptionist, approached me hesitantly. "Claire, I'm so sorry. I knew something felt wrong, but I didn't know what to do. Preston said if any of us reported concerns, we'd be fired for making false accusations." "Did you see the woman who visited my mother?" I asked. Stephanie nodded. "Several times. Preston always escorted her personally. He told me she was a healthcare consultant reviewing our dementia care protocols. I didn't question it because it seemed legitimate." "Can you describe her?" "Blonde, professional-looking, maybe 40. She drove a nice car, a black BMW. I noticed because I thought it was weird for a consultant to have such an expensive vehicle." That was the second description matching the mysterious woman. We had a pattern, but we still didn't have an identity. The investigation moved quickly over the next several days. Detectives discovered that Preston had been working with a woman named Heather Vincent, a disbarred attorney who specialized in exploiting vulnerable adults. Heather's scheme was sophisticated. She would identify care facilities with lax oversight, then work with corrupt managers like Preston to gain access to residents with dementia. Preston would over-medicate the residents to keep them compliant. Then Heather would visit during their most lucid moments and convince them to sign documents, granting her power of attorney or adding her to their bank accounts. In Mom's case, they'd gotten her to sign a power of attorney that would have given Heather complete control of her finances. But because I actively managed Mom's accounts and noticed the unauthorized withdrawals, I'd triggered the investigation before Heather could execute the full scheme. Other residents hadn't been as lucky. Mr. Campbell had signed over power of attorney 3 weeks earlier. Heather had already transferred $40,000 from his accounts before his daughter noticed the discrepancies. Mrs. Anderson had added Heather to her bank accounts, and $28,000 had disappeared. Mr. Foster had signed a deed transferring his house to a shell company Heather controlled. In total, Heather and Preston had stolen over $300,000 from 6 residents over 4 months. "You saved your mother," Detective Raymond told me, "and by reporting this when you did, you prevented them from stealing potentially millions more." They were just getting started. The legal proceedings that followed were extensive. Preston Walsh was charged with elder abuse, financial exploitation, practicing medicine without a license, and conspiracy to commit fraud. He eventually pleaded guilty and received a sentence of 15 years in prison. Heather Vincent faced even more serious charges, including organized fraud, identity theft, and exploitation of vulnerable adults. Her trial revealed she'd run similar schemes in 3 other states before coming to ours. She was sentenced to 25 years. The corporate office of the company that owned Riverside conducted a complete investigation of all their facilities. They discovered Preston had been hired despite having 2 prior complaints at other care homes, complaints the company had failed to properly investigate during their background check. The company ended up settling a class action lawsuit for $8 million, which was distributed among the families of affected residents. They also implemented new oversight protocols, mandatory security cameras in all resident rooms, and independent quarterly audits of all facilities. For me, the aftermath was both satisfying and painful. I'd stopped the abuse and brought criminals to justice. But I couldn't shake the guilt that Mom had been vulnerable in the first place, that I'd trusted Riverside to care for her, and they'd betrayed that trust. I moved Mom to a different facility with excellent reviews and transparent practices. I visited every single day, sometimes twice. I met with her care team weekly. I reviewed every medication, every charge, every aspect of her care with obsessive attention. 6 months after Preston's arrest, I received a call from Patricia, the nurse who'd first spoken up during the investigation. I wanted you to know that several of us from Riverside have started a support group for healthcare workers who witness abuse but are afraid to report it. We're trying to change the culture in elder care facilities, make it safer for staff to speak up when they see problems. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. What prompted this? Your mother's case. Watching how you fought for her, how you didn't back down even when Preston tried to intimidate you. It made us realize we had a responsibility too. We see these residents every day. If we don't protect them, who will? The support group grew into a statewide organization. They successfully lobbied for stronger whistleblower protections for healthcare workers and mandatory abuse reporting training for all care facility staff. Brenda, the nurse who'd been afraid to risk her pension, became one of the organization's strongest advocates. I was a coward, she told me once. I saw what was happening, and I stayed silent because I was afraid. Never again. I've got maybe 5 years left before retirement, and I'm going to spend them making sure other nurses don't make the same mistake I did. Even Carlos, the young nurse who'd barely been aware of the abuse, became involved. I'm new to this field, he said, learning that exploitation like this is possible, that managers can use their authority to hurt the people they're supposed to protect. It changed how I see my job. I'm not just following orders anymore, I'm thinking critically about everything. A year after the investigation, I was invited to speak at a state healthcare conference about recognizing and reporting elder abuse. Standing in front of 300 healthcare professionals, I told Mom's story. I almost didn't push back when Preston told me I couldn't visit, I admitted. Part of me thought, maybe he really did know what was best for her medical care. Maybe I was being an overprotective daughter. Maybe I should trust the professionals. I paused, looking out at the attent faces. But I'd noticed small things that didn't add up. A bruise here, excessive sedation there, unexplained charges, a mysterious visitor. None of these things alone proved abuse, but together they formed a pattern. And when Preston tried to isolate Mom from the one person who would notice that pattern, me, I knew something was seriously wrong. After my presentation, dozens of people approached with their own stories. Adult children who'd noticed concerning signs but hadn't known how to act. Healthcare workers who'd witnessed problems but feared retaliation. Facility administrators who wanted to implement better safeguards but didn't know where to start. The conversation continued for hours. By the end of the day, we'd formed a coalition dedicated to reforming elder care oversight in our state. 2 years after Preston's arrest, comprehensive elder care reform legislation passed. It required security cameras in all resident rooms with family access, mandatory independent audits every 6 months, stronger background checks for all care facility employees, and significant penalties for facilities that retaliated against whistleblowers. The law was named Dorothy's Law after my mother. Mom's Alzheimer's continued to progress, as we knew it would. But in her new facility, she was safe, properly medicated, and genuinely cared for. I could visit whenever I wanted. I could review her records anytime. I could speak with her care team without fear they were hiding something. 3 years after the investigation, Mom passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was grateful it happened at the new facility, surrounded by staff who actually cared about her, not the place where she'd been exploited and abused. At her funeral, Patricia, Brenda, and Carlos all attended. So did several families whose loved ones had been victimized by Preston and Heather. So did Victoria Hayes, the investigator whose quick action had stopped the scheme. Your mother's legacy is protecting other vulnerable people, Victoria told me at the reception. Because of what happened to her, because of how you fought back, thousands of families now have better protections. That matters. She was right. Mom's victimization had led to systematic change. but I still wished it had never happened in the first place. In the months after Mom's death, I channeled my grief into advocacy work. I joined boards of several elder care organizations. I consulted with families who suspected abuse at care facilities. I trained healthcare workers on recognizing exploitation patterns. The work was demanding and often heartbreaking, but it was also meaningful. Every family I helped, every potential victim I protected, felt like honoring Mom's memory. 5 years after Preston Walsh's arrest, I stood at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new state-of-the-art elder care facility, built to the highest standards of transparency and accountability. Every room had cameras. Every staff member underwent extensive background checks and training. Every resident's family had 24/7 access to care records and live video feeds. It was called Dorothy House. "This facility represents everything we've learned," the director said during her speech. "Elder care should be about dignity, transparency, and genuine compassion. It should never be about exploitation or abuse." Dorothy Hartley's story taught us that the best defense against abuse is visibility, making sure families can always see how their loved ones are being treated. After the ceremony, I walked through the building, seeing Mom's name on plaques, on the memorial garden, on the staff training center. Her suffering had created something good, something that would protect countless others. I thought about that first phone call from Preston when he'd tried to ban my visits. I thought about the fear I'd felt, the doubt, the temptation to just accept his authority and stay away. But I'd trusted my instincts. I'd noticed the patterns. I'd fought back. And when the investigator arrived, Preston's own staff, the people who'd worked alongside him, who'd witnessed his crimes, had refused to defend him, because they'd known. They'd always known. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to expose it. Mom couldn't remember her own story by the end. The Alzheimer's had taken that from her. But I would remember for both of us. I would tell her story again and again, to anyone who would listen. Because elder abuse thrives in silence and shadows. It depends on people looking away, accepting authority without question, dismissing their instincts. Preston Walsh had counted on me being one of those people. He'd been wrong. And because he'd been wrong, Mom's legacy lived on. Not in the money he'd tried to steal, not in the documents he'd tried to forge, but in the protections her case had created for vulnerable people everywhere. That was justice. Real, lasting justice. And it was enough.